Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Chat, a no-holds-barred, anything-goes videocast about everything and anything gaming related. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando. Hello everyone, welcome to Dice Commando and the Commando Chat. I'm Andrew with you here as always, and thank you very much for joining me today. So we as gamers, and specifically those of us who enjoy expandable games, heck, we want our games to last as long as possible. Not only does that maximize our enjoyment of the game, but it also prolongs and protects our investment. Now, a fundamental key to making these games last longer is, at a basic level, growth, which means getting in new people. Yet we continually see across our various communities ourselves as gamers either intentionally or non-intentionally putting up roadblocks, making it harder for new players to enter the game and enjoy our own hobby. Today's topic is certainly not a light-hearted one, but it's certainly relevant and worthy of discussion. So I'd actually been kind of working on this topic already, or not really, it had kind of been in the back of my head, and then earlier this week on the Destiny Facebook page, a gentleman shared this meme, right, which is, I mean, we've all seen this meme in various forms, but basically what this was saying is that part of the reason that we have roadblocks, right, for lack of a better term, to new people getting onto our game is because of ourselves, right? And I mean, it's apt. And to be clear, the impetus for me finally pulling the trigger on doing this was this. But what I want to, what this meme particularly is, I believe, referring to is, you see that word a-holes there, right? It's specifically referring to that. And what I more want to talk about isn't the obvious stuff, which is, the smelly guy in the corner who's being a jerk because he'll pwn, right? That's a other different gamer term, right? But it's the same type of idea, right? I'm not talking about the jerk in the corner. I'm not talking about, Captain Underpants, whatever it is. What I want to talk about today are some of the more non-obvious stuff that even we as people who consider ourselves to be welcoming might still do to put off new gamers. That's kind of where I want to go with. And there's really two categories that I think that kind of the non-obvious stuff we fall into. I mean, let's think about it, right? How many of us will sit down and show a player how to play a game? Most of us, right? You want new players. You're like, oh my god, yes, let's sit down, we'll play, you can use my deck, and then you can buy this and this and this, I'll help you, I'll give you some free commons, whatever. That happens all the time, right? You see it at game stores all the time, and it's great. But yet then we, even unknowingly, can turn around and, I mean, I'm guilty of it too, right? All of us are. We can turn around and do things that can turn new players off as well. So that's more what I wanted to focus in on today, rather than the obvious, jerk portion of it. So what I kind of bucket these behaviors in are one of two things, right? The first is intentionally vague, and the second is unnecessarily complicated. And granted, they can kind of go hand in hand. But to kind of explain this, I've really picked three examples that I want to use across various portions of gaming, specifically that we deal with on this channel. Before we get into that, one more thing I want to note is a lot of us sitting here right now will say, well, my community's fantastic. And you know what? It probably is. I mean, most of the communities that are, like, if you're watching this, there's an excellent chance that you're in one of the communities that I care about, and most of them are fantastic. But you do need to remember it's a sliding scale, right? People coming from, maybe some random board gaming community that's very tight-knit into Star Wars Destiny may see, that one guy in Star Wars Destiny who's not good being a jerk and say, man, what a toxic community. And For me, going into the Flesh and Blood community, there were a lot of, to me, toxic elements in the Flesh and Blood community. But to them, coming from a Yu-Gi-Oh or something like that, oh my God, Flesh and Blood's amazing. Like there's, and so it's a sliding scale. And what we need to remember is also that we as gamers, very few of us play only one game. So you have these elements that are in multiple communities. You have a lot of overlap. And lastly, you need to remember that we live in the age of social media, and we as humans, right? Social media not only amplifies the negative, but we as humans, we can have 9 things go right for us in a day, and 1 thing go wrong for us in a day, and come back disappointed because we had a bad day. That is natural human nature. So you can go have 4 good games and run into Smelly Jerk and come home and thinking, man, I don't like this game because it has a bad community, right? I mean, that's just human nature, right? So we need to overexert ourselves to overcome that. And that's kind of why I wanted to point out a lot of the pitfalls that I think we as communities often fall into that make it harder for new player, or not necessarily harder, but less welcoming to new players. And so just to go ahead and flash up, because we diverged a little bit, right? The 2 statements are intentionally vague and unnecessarily complicated. So the very first example I want to use is actually from a Flesh and Blood card game. So when I first got into this game, it was, I started at the very beginning, but let's say, I think it was December is when this cast went up. And one of the things, so it doesn't matter whether you're very familiar with the game or not, but they have a card type called a defense reaction. Now, in Flesh and Blood, every card in the game can also be used to defend an attack by using its defense value. And all you have to do is just play that card from your hand and it defends, with the exception of defense reactions. Defense reactions are a special type of card that can only be played, which means that you have to pay for it. So my proposal that I put in a cast was that, hey, because this is different, why not make it visually different on the card by changing the color of the defense symbol? And I thought this was reasonable because it's a mistake that, even today, it's a mistake that every new player, I'm sure that there are some of you out there that have never made a mistake ever, right? But almost every new player in Fab has made this mistake at one point where they tried to play a defend react, or tried to defend with a defend react. It's happened to almost everybody, and then you learn it, and you see it, and you move on. But when I made this suggestion in the Flesh and Blood community, it was almost like I pooped on their Cheerios to certain people. They're just like, well, it's in the rules, can't just read the rules, and blah, blah, blah. And, you can imagine how the conversation went with certain elements. And, whether I was right or whether I was wrong, it doesn't matter. What I was proposing was, without changing, my proposal changed zero of the way the actual game played or worked. All it did was make it easier for people. And that was a bad thing, right? So let's apply that argument to someone now trying to teach someone new. Well, you don't get that, you're dumb. Well, okay. And maybe I'm making an unfair jump there, but the point is, why wouldn't we go ahead as a community, even as a game designer, why wouldn't we go ahead and take those extra steps to make it easier to get new people into the game? Why are we assuming that people are coming from other games in order to play our game? That's inherently bad, right? We should make things as easily as possible. So that one falls into the unnecessarily complicated category. Next, let's move to, Star Wars Destiny, right? That's the main meat and blood of this channel. I've had casts in the past, specifically one where I talked about why we don't write cards the way that they make sense, right? We have if-thens that don't actually follow how an if-then statement works, and so on and so on. And I had posted a cast about this, and the reception was overall good, because I think a large portion of the people who watch this channel at least got it. But we still have these elements who prefer things to be unnecessarily complicated. There are elements out there in the gaming community that like things to be different because, whether it's that they want it to be. And to be fair, I don't think that for the majority of these people, it's that they want to have some sort of unfair advantage. It's not that they want to trick you. They just don't understand why you can't understand. I think that's really the best way to say it. And for me, I think that we should take the extra effort to write things better for people to understand, right? I mean, my background as an engineering manager is that if someone messes up one of my procedures, or I should say by messes up, I mean misexecutes, doesn't do something right, doesn't do something the way I wanted them to do it, my job is to make that not happen again, right? It's not to say this person's dumb, they need fired. My job is to change how I write the procedure or change the procedure or whatever in order to facilitate their success. So why do we as gamers not take that same attitude? I mean, it becomes very difficult to not think that it's definitely in the back of your head, it's, well, I'm smarter than you. I mean, how else to explain it? Why would we not take the extra steps to make it simpler for people to, like, if what we want to do is sit down and prove that we're smarter than someone by outplaying them, does being a rules lawyer really give you that same satisfaction, right? And I don't want to give any specific examples in Star Wars Destiny because a lot of these people watch this, and I'm not trying to make it personal, but there are a lot of people in charge of the Star Wars Destiny rules community who say, well, we're going to write it this way because that's the way it's always been written. And it's like, well, it's always been confusing. Why can't we change it? Well, because that's the way it is. Well, is that the right answer? I don't think it is, right? So anyway, we've hit on that one enough, and obviously that's a sensitive subject with some people, but again, as we as gamers, there's no reason we have to make things or enjoy things more complicated, and that kind of falls into the intentionally vague category. If a normal human being reads something as if A then B, why would you write it differently in a card game? It just doesn't make sense. And then the only thing that's going to do, the only result that's going to have, is to make it harder for a new player who's not familiar with gaming to get into it. And there's zero reason that we shouldn't make it simpler that way. The last topic I want to talk about, it really doesn't fall into either, to be fair. And this comes from my own personal experience of getting into a hobby war game, Star Wars Legion, for the very first time. And I want to be very clear of this. Star Wars Legion guys are actually a lot better with this than like the 40K and all that are. However, why is there this prevailing feeling in the miniatures wargaming community that if you don't paint your army, you can't play with me? I don't understand, because I understand why at a high level you would want the experience. I mean, yeah, when you get all the painted armies on the table with painted terrain, it's awesome. It's an awesome experience. However, recall back to when you first started and when you first bought your army. It has taken me the better part of it, and yes, I'm slower and I have other things going on in my life, but like, it has taken me the better part of a year and almost $100 some odd more than just the product I bought to get my army painted. That means, by your standard of having someone sit down at the table with you and requiring a painted army, that means that they have to get in and put in whatever. I mean, sure, it doesn't take them as long, but like, as me, I'm saying, but like, why can't they sit down and enjoy the game that they paid for and want to play before they do the same time commitment as you? Holding people to the same time commitment standards as you on an entry level to the game is bar none crazy, right? And yes, I'm sure that there are some elements out there, but to view them as a lesser player or a lesser human being because they haven't put the same time in that you have over the last 15 years is crazy. And I'll flash up the meme again, and you'll notice the meme specifically is referring to hobbyists, which in my opinion, I believe this one's specifically referring to like the 40K or the miniatures crowd. So that is kind of a shots fired, I grant you that, but which is kind of funny considering shots are being fired in the meme. But my point here is, I understand fundamentally why you would want someone else to have a painted army, but to put that as a barrier for existing is only hurting yourself, right? You as a hobby, I mean, all of us, regardless of whether it's miniature or any other game, but as an expandable game, what keeps your game alive is sales. That is the truth. And if someone wants to go out and spend $150 to buy product, that helps you in some minuscule way because it helps keep the game alive. So for you to not support them or to discourage them because they are not the same level as gamer as you are is really, really short-sighted. And I really struggle understanding your point of view on that. But again, that is just my perspective. I just don't think that, I mean, whatever. I'm gonna let it go. But I don't see why expecting someone to be the same as you in order to play your game is successful for your hobby on the whole. And I actually think that's a good way to end this cast is, if our objective is to grow the game, part of growing a game is getting in new gamers, and that doesn't mean stealing them from other games necessarily, right? We can't grow gaming as a whole unless we get new people to gaming. So if we're just cannibalizing people from other games, we're only hurting ourselves in the end, because then we don't grow our game, right? Or then you're counting on basically Pokemon players. You're counting on Pokemon to bring them in and convert them, and that's a really bad business model for the longevity of the games that we care about. So not only do we have to be nice people, which I think the majority of us are, right? We do a great job helping people learn and stuff like that, with the exception of, the aforementioned, 40K people, or I shouldn't pick on 40K, but with the aforementioned select individuals in the wargaming crowd, we do a pretty good job of supporting people when they're new on the face of it. But I think what we need to do as community leaders, for running tournaments, for whatever, is we need to really internalize, are we making things unnecessarily complicated? And in many cases, across almost every game I've played, there are instances where things are more complicated than they have to be, and we actually put in effort to make them that way. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And that is a culture shift that we as gamers need to execute in order to protect the longevity of the games that we care about. So that's my piece today. Thank you very much for joining me and listening to this point. I would be very, very, very interested to hear your feedback on this as well, your own experiences, what's made it more difficult, what's made it easier. That would be really great. Thank you very much for joining me today, and go Commando, guys.